You're an expert in these three arenas. What is going to happen?
Well, here's one thing that I think. In the book of Joel you mentioned, where it talks about the sun turning to sackcloth and the moon to blood, it's in the same context that God says he's going to judge all the nations who are trying to divide the land of Israel. And that's what's going on right now. And America is leading the push to divide the land of Israel. And I think these are the heavenly billboard warning signs by God to Israel not to divide their land. It's also that America should not partake. But here's the other thing. We see a war in 1948, a biblically prophetic war. We see a biblically prophetic war in 67. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think there's a good chance we could see a biblically prophetic war in Israel because there are several that haven't taken place yet.
A Psalm 83 that talks about an Arab-Israeli war, a climactic concluding Arab-Israeli war.
Now, tell me what nations are involved in Psalm 83.
Well, we go by, Asaph wrote 3,000 years ago this psalm, and of course he didn't have back then Jordan and Hezbollah and Palestinians. Who he was referencing in the vernacular of his time would be Lebanon to the north of Israel, and of course you have the Hezbollah there with about 50,000 plus rockets. You've got Syria. You've got Jordan, you've got Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and of course the Muslim Brotherhood are inside of Egypt now on a rise. You've got the Hamas, and it seems to be the first participant mentioned is the Palestinians. The Palestinian refugees, known as the Tents of Edom, listed first in that Confederacy of Nations. They come together, they form crafty council. They say they want to cut the nation of Israel off, that Israel can be remembered no more.
So you're telling me that this Psalm 83 war is not Ezekiel 38:39. It is a different war. Is that what you're saying?
I do believe that's it. I actually do. There's for various reasons for that. One is you've got different population groups. None of the groups I just mentioned are involved in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Ezekiel speaks of an outer group of nations that don't even share common borders with Israel. Russia, Iran, Libya, Ethiopia, Turkey, just to name a few of them. Those are not the nations I just listed for your audience. These are the nations of Psalm 83. Also, Russia's motivation to put their coalition together is for plunder and great booty. The Psalm 83 motivation is to take the pastures of God for themselves. They want another Arab state. They want a Palestine. They want the Promised Land.
Whether that is among us or whether that's rising in the east. Because as you said, you can't have an Eastern power ruling the world and a Western power ruling the world. And so if we have been that superpower, but the Bible describes that there's going to be another superpower in the end of days, and we believe in the East, that means something happens in the West. And so in the same apples and oranges way, if we vacate that position as being the world's superpower, or the dominant power, it's going to open the door for another dominant power, and it has to be because this has broken down. This has ceased to be, at least in the form that we've known it, in the way that we've known it.
And let me reiterate something you just said, because people would say, now wait a minute, how could another power arise? Let's say if it was a dictator who's slaughtering people, murdering people, how could they arise? Because the West normally, well, let's say the West being Britain, the UK, the United States, France, etc., which are considered Western powers, and especially in the Middle Eastern mindset, they would come to the rescue. But we have to understand something. That's what Bill's saying, that for the East, and there are kings of the East in the book of Revelation, they are the power source and the power force of the tribulation. The West is not mentioned. There's no mention of kings of the West. There's no mention of the West at all, hardly in prophecy. I mean, it's just not there. The West being specifically the United States, we have Canada, the U.S., we've got also Latin America is considered the Western Hemisphere. And you've got Britain, the UK, etc. But something has to happen.